Hey, what's going on? It's Evan here. Today we're going to be taking a look at how to convert geometry to hair, and we're specifically going to be looking at tube groom. This is what I used to do when I used XGen a while ago. I would be given tubes and I would just convert them into guides and I would use that to generate the hair. And so I wanted to figure out how to do that in Houdini. And so let's go to Houdini really quick. And so this is what I have here, and this is what we're going to be creating so that we can see, we have the base tubes right here, and then we're going to convert that into this nice, beautiful looking mohawk thingy. It's pretty amazing. So let's get started. All right, so here we are in Houdini, and let's see, today we're going to start all the way from scratch. So I'm just going to make a geometry node and place it down, and I'm just going to rename it to setup. And I'm just going to save it really quick. Just give me 1 second. All right, so I have that saved. And let's see, let's go inside of our node network. And the first thing I'm going to drop is a pig head. It is the second best test geometry right behind the rubber toy. We all know the rubber toy is the best. Anyway, so I'm going to drop down a circle now. So let's go put that down. And let's see, I'm going to put the display flag on it. And I'm going to template this just so I can see it. I'm going to switch it to, wrong one, to the YZ plane. And let's put it on polygon. And also I want it to be open. I suppose I could do this with a line too. But I don't know, I'll just do it with a circle. Alright, so let's see, I'm going to put the divisions. I'm just going to up it just a little bit so it's a little bit higher res. And I'm going to change the arc amount to just like 100, 105. Yeah, there we go. And then I'm going to rotate it just a little bit, like so. And I think I want to bring it just a little bit closer. So I'm going to switch to the handles tool and I'm going to bring it down. And it's a little bit big, so I'm going to scale it down. It looks like I'll have to raise it up again. Let's see. So I'm just going to go to the side view and reposition it. There you go. That looks a lot better. I think I'm going to rotate it just a little bit more. There we go. That's looking good. I'm going to use erase op now, and that's going to allow me to project this circle onto the pig head geometry. So let's connect this together. Ooh, that's not right. Let's switch it from project raise to minimum distance, and that's much better. And I kind of want it, I think I want the points to actually go inside the geometry a little bit. So I'm going to go to the lift, and I'm going to start using that, push it in. All right, so that's a lot better. So that's going inside the geometry. And we'll see why later. It's because later on we're going to be creating groups, and so it kind of helps if the, we're going to be creating groups from the, the tubes that are coming out of here. So the tubes actually need to be intersecting the geometry because we're going to be getting the groups on this pig based off of those tubes. So it needs to actually intersect. And so that's why I'm having this curve go inside the geometry. And so now that I have that done, I'm going to turn off the template. Well, I mean, because we can already see it from this node. But regardless, I'm going to type in resample and drop that down. And I'm going to put it to 4 segments. And let me turn on display points so I can see that. And I'm going to turn off this and put it on maximum segments. And then I'm just going to put it on 4. Let me display that. Yeah, that's looking good. Should be good. All right. So let's drop down a copy to points. And I'm going to connect a line node to the geometry to copy. So I'm going to drop down line really quick and put that in. And we can see right away that it is not facing the right direction. That's okay. It won't be too hard to fix. But really quickly, let's put the point count to like 50 so that it's a little bit higher res. All right, so let's put this back on. What we want to happen is I want each of the tubes to actually follow the curve, because right now they're all just going straight up, and so that's not what we want. we can fix that pretty easily. I'm going to drop down a polyframe node. And really quickly, I'm going to put the display flag on that and turn off the template. And I'm going to turn on display normals so that we can see the normals. And yeah, it's not right. So I'm going to disable this one. And for this, I'm going to put n. And that way we can get the normals based off of that. And that should be good. Well, actually, it's probably going to be the opposite of what we need, but that's fine too. So yeah, now we can see that it is going the right way, or direction, just like the wrong way. And so we're going to flip that really easily. I'm going to drop down. Well, actually, let me go to polyframe. Let me just put this to points so that we have that normal on the points. All right, so now we're going to do a point wrangle. Oops, I think I did the wrong node. Yeah, hold on. There it is, point wrangle. And we just want to invert it, or yeah, we want to multiply it by -1. So I'm going to type in v at n, and then I'm going to do times equals -1, and then put a semicolon. And there we go, we can see that it flipped it, and now that is going the right way. All right, perfect. And what I'm going to do is we're going to use these later on as clumping guides. So I'm going to just type in null, and I'm going to attach that right up. And I'm going to just type in, let's see, out, and then clump guides. Perfect. And now I'm going to drop down a sweep node because we need to actually create the tubes. And, oh, actually, that reminds me of something. Now that I think about it, I don't want resolution coming from this node. Well, actually, it doesn't really matter because I need to drop a resample after it. So I'm going to do a resample, and I'm going to switch it to 50. So maximum segments, and then do 50. And the reason why I want to use a resample node, well, actually, I mean, technically you could have just left it on 50 here. And then when you go to the resample node, you just don't choose anything, and then it just won't change anything here. But what I want is this curve U attribute. And what this does is it gives a nice attribute going from 0 on the root all the way to 1 at the tip. And we can visualize that pretty easily. I'm going to do color. And I'm going to connect that really quickly. And then where it says constant, I'm going to do ramp from attribute. And I'll type in curve, I spelled that wrong, curve U, and let me turn off display points. And now we can see that we have a ramp, and this ramp is going from black to white, and we can see that it's doing the same thing over here, oops, in the viewport. The root is black, and then at the tip it's white, and so if we change the color here, we can see that it affects it over here. And so we know our attribute is working as intended. And so now, let's make our tubes. I'm going to connect the sweep node and put the display flag on it and select it. And it's not working by default, and that's just because we need to switch this to round tube. And there we go. I don't think I want my normal showing, so I'm going to hide that. And I'm going to turn on the geometry template for the pig head just so that we can see it really quickly. There we go. And I think the thickness is pretty good, but I'm going to make it just a little bit thicker. So maybe like 1.5. That's a little bit too much. I'll do like 1.3. There we go. And I'll add end caps. I'll put that to single polygon. And let's do scale along curve because we want to make it get thinner at the tip. So I'm just going to drag this down until I get something that I like. And this is looking pretty good. I think that I want to give it some more resolution though. So let's go scroll up, and where it says columns, I'm going to increase this amount. I'm going to try 50. And yeah, that seems to be enough. So I'm going to leave that how it is. And now what we need to do is we need to create groups for the base of this tube. And we also need to create, or when I say base, I think a better way of saying it would be the root. And then we also need to create a group for the tips. And there are a few ways we can do this. One way is we could just hit S to switch to our selection key. And I could just select these different tips right here, and then I could just type in group, and then here we have a group here. But since we have this curve view attribute, there's actually a better way we can do it that's procedural. So I'm going to type in group expression and connect that up. And the curve view attribute, I believe it's a point attribute. So I'm going to switch this from primitives to points. All right. And let's see. I'm going to name one of the groups. Well, let's name the first one root because we're going to do the roots first. And we're going to type in a very simple expression here. I'm going to type in at curve u equals, and then I'm going to do 0.2. And it's giving me an error right now. And so I did not mean to do that. What I meant to do is less than. There we go. All right, now we can see that we're selecting anything where curve view attribute has a value that is less than 0.2. And so it's selecting all of these points right here. And so now we also want to make another group for the tips. So I'm going to hit the plus icon, and I'm going to name this group tip. And we're going to copy this expression right here and paste it right here. And instead of less than 0.2, what I'm going to do is greater than 0.8. And let's see how that looks. Actually, let me disable that really quick so I can see this one. And yep, we can see right here that we have the group, and now it's selecting the tips of our tubes. And so that's a nice procedural way to do that. And a way to visualize that is, let's go back to the resample node, and I'm going to turn on display points. If I type in visualize and connect that up, and then put the display flag on it, let's go to visual. Well, actually, let me turn off update visualizer, and then let's go to attribute, and let's type in curve u. And then instead of color, let's do a marker. And now we can actually see the values that it's getting. And so we can see it's going all the way from 0 all the way up until 1. And so that's how we were able to use curve view in our expression. So we said anything less than a value of 0.2 will be in our group. And so we can see that right here, this is 0.204 or 0.204. Yep. And so anything less than that will be in the group. And by the same token, up at the top, we said anything greater than 0.8. So that would be right here. It says 0.81. So anything greater than this would be in the tip group. And so that's how we're able to create the group. So let me delete this really quickly because I don't need that. And I think I re-enabled it. Okay, good. So now we have both of our groups right there. And that is looking good. And I think I'm actually going to promote that group really quickly. So I'm going to type in group promote and connect that. And let's see, group name. Well, let's do from points to primitives. And let's do both of the groups. So let me just do a star. There we go. And now it's going to promote both of them. So basically what that's doing is it's just taking the point groups and promoting them to primitive groups. All right. So what we're going to be using to actually create these, what we're going to do is we're going to be advecting guides. And the thing is that what we use to get hair inside these tubes, it doesn't actually create them. It just advects curves that you already have. So we actually need to create the curves before we can advect them. And so I'm going to copy this pig geometry. I'm just going to hit Alt and drag it down so that I have a second copy right here. And I'm going to subdivide it so that we have higher resolution. And let me plug that in. And now we have some higher resolution geometry. And so I want to emit some hair, but I only want to emit it where the tubes are going to be. So thankfully, there's a cool way that we can do that. I'm going to drop down the group node. Here we go. And this method only works with points. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to create a point group like we did before, and then we're going to promote it to a primitive group. So I'm going to connect this tube right here to group 1. And let's give this a better name. I'm going to name this source. And I want the group to have the same name as the node. So I'm going to go to group name and type in $OS, and that just means operator string. And that's just going to grab the number or the name that you type for the node name right here, which is source. And so if I middle mouse click this, you can see that it switches to source, which just means it's evaluating that expression so that you can see what it actually is going to be. And so you can see that if I middle mouse click here and I look at the groups, it says source right there. So we can see that that's actually working. Now, as I was saying, we need to switch this over to a point group. And let's see, there's keep in bounding region. So I'm going to enable that and switch it to bounding object. And you can see it says points or vertices only. And so that's why we had to switch it to a point group. And so right now we can see that we're selecting a whole bunch of points that are inside these tubes. And that's perfect because we want to emit hair only from those areas. Well, not emit, but we just want hair in those areas, which is perfect. And so I'm going to promote this group. So I'm going to do group promote and wire that in. And we named it source. And so I'm going to do from, well, auto, and then I'm just going to do the primitives. And so now we can see we have a nice primitive group that we want our hair source to come from. All right, so it's time to actually create the hair. So I'm going to type in hair generate, and I'm going to place that node and connect it up. And it's making hair everywhere, and that's not what we want. So we're going to, where it says group, I'm going to select the group that we just made, source. And so now we can see that there's only hair in the areas that we want. The density is a bit high. So I'm going to put it down to 500. And these aren't nearly long enough. So I'm going to make them just a bit, well, actually the length doesn't really matter because when it gets advected, it's going to make it longer. But just to make it easier to see, I'll just go ahead and make it a bit longer. And the next thing that we need to do is create the velocity, because the way the guided vection works is it advects the curves based off of a velocity field. So we're going to do velocity from surface. And here's that node right here. It's going to create the velocity for us. And that's why we created the groups earlier, because we need groups. We need to select groups in order to control the direction that this node creates the velocity. So you can see right here, it says divergence group. So that's where we're going to be adding the groups. But it's a little bit low resolution. So I'm going to type in 04, maybe 02. Just go to 1, and that should be fine. That's looking a lot better. And so let me look at the velocity from surface, and we're going to do 2 groups. And one of them is going to be tip, and one of them is going to be root. So let's do the root first. And then we're going to do the tip next. And then for the tip, I'm just going to put the value to positive, like 0.5. We could adjust these later because we'll actually be able to see what it's doing later. But for now, I'm just going to type in a few values, just default values. Because I know for the root that it needs to be, actually, I think I put that in backwards. For the root, it needs to be a positive value. And for the tip, it needs to be a negative value. Perfect. All right, so let's type in guide advect. And let's look at what we need. We need guides, and then we need skin, and then we need skin VDB. Let's see, we need a skin VDB, so let's make that really quickly. Let's do VDB from polygons. And let's connect that to the subdivide. And it's a little bit low res, so I'm going to do 0.02. And let's do fill interior, and I'm just going to put exterior band voxels to like 10. There we go. So now we should have all the information that we need. So if we go here, it says hair curves, and then this is guides, so the hair curves go into the guides. And then let's see, skin, it goes into the skin from there. Then we have the collision VDB going into the skin VDB. And then we're going to get our velocity and collision from this node that we just created a moment ago. And so let's put the display flag there. We can see that it's sort of working, but it's not quite filling up the tubes as much as I'd like. And so really quickly, let's go over here. And I find that for the pressure solve iterations, 20 is really low. The quality usually seems a lot better when you put it higher, so I'm going to put it up to 150. And it does take a little bit more time, but often you get better results. And so let me disable these groups really quickly. And actually, let me change the resolution just so it goes a bit faster. So if we enable one of these groups right here, this is how I knew whether or not to put a positive or negative value. So by default, this is at 0, so it's not doing anything. If we put in a negative value, you can see that it's going the wrong way. It's getting sucked towards the root, and we wanted it to go away, and so that's how I know that I need to do 0.5. And by the same token, we can do the same thing here with the roots, or the tips rather. If I type in 0.5, we can see that it's going the wrong way. And so that's how I knew I needed to use a negative value for the tips and a positive value for the roots. And so now that I have both of those on, let's go back to the guided vect node. And I don't usually use constrained advection. I like to use fill collision field. And what I want to do is I want to turn off stop on collision, and that way it goes all the way to the top. And you can see that it's creating all these additional hairs that I don't want, but I can delete them very easily. There's this section right here. It says output group of affected primitives. So I'm going to click that, and what it's going to do is it's going to create a group that wasn't affected by the velocity field. So I'm going to type in blast, and I'm going to connect that into the guides, and we're going to select affected, and then I'm going to delete non-selected. And now that we can see, it deleted all of the areas that we don't want, and it's generally looking pretty good. There is something, however, that I would like to change. I don't want all of these small little hairs growing up right here. I only want the bigger ones to show, so we can delete those small ones really quickly. And so the way we could do that is by dropping down a measure sop, and connect that. And we want to measure the perimeter, and so that way we can find the length of each strand. And so I'm going to type down primitive wrangle and connect that up. And what I want to do is I want to isolate all of the primitives that have a very short perimeter and delete them, and that way I'm only left with the longer one. So we can do that with the if statement. And actually, just to make it easier to type, I'm going to go back to this measure node, and let's just change the attribute to p for perimeter, and that'll be easier to type in. And so I'm going to type in if, and I'm going to do f at p, because it's a float value, is less than 0.1. So I'm saying if the length is less than, or if the perimeter is less than 0.1, then we're going to do this next statement. And so we want to remove it. So I'm going to use the remove prim function. And so I'm going to do parentheses and then 0. And then I'm just going to do at prim num, and that will get the correct prim num for each one. And then I'm going to do comma 1. And the reason why I put 1 instead of 0 is because 1 will delete all of the points, because you can delete the perimeters and keep the points, or I'm sorry, delete the primitives but keep the points, but I want everything deleted. And so then I'm just going to do a colon, and voila, it's working. So if I disable this and enable it, you can see all of these smaller primitives being deleted, and that's exactly what we want. Alright, so the next thing that we're going to do is generate the hair. These are actually just the guides that we're going to grow the hair from. And so I'm going to use guide skin attribute lookup, and this is just going to give the guides some information that we need. Let's see, it's just going to have it's going to tell each primitive, or I'm sorry, it's going to tell each hair which primitive on the skin it is attached to. And so let's connect that up to the skin, and so we have that attribute. And then just for the sake of making sure it doesn't give us a warning, I'm just going to put in a rest position. And now let's do hair gen. Let's see, what is this one looking for? Oh, that's the skin, and this is the guide. So we need to make sure that the first one is actually plugged into the skin. So let's drag that out and grab the skin right here. And nice, we can see we're generating hair. And let's turn off grow unguided hair, and that way it'll only generate it next to where our guides are, and this is good. And I'm going to drop down a color node just to make it easier to see. Make it blue. Oh, there's something else I'd like to say. Right now we're not actually viewing the thickness of the hair, we're just seeing the curve. If you actually want to see how it looks, go back up to OBJ level and then go to miscellaneous and do shade, open curves, and viewport. And now we can actually see the thickness, and so we can see it's really thin. So I'm going to go to attributes and appearance, and I'm going to make it a little bit thicker. There we go. Nice. And I think I want some more here because that's not really a lot. So I'm going to do 5,000. All right, that's looking a lot better. And actually, I'm going to put it down to 2,000 for now. And the one other thing that I will do on this node is for the influence radius, I'm going to put this to like 1.5. There we go. Now, I like to gain a little bit more control over the hair so that it's not just growing out everywhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually clump. I'm going to use clumping to fix that. And so remember how we created those clumping guides earlier, right here, out clump guides? Let's go ahead and grab those again. So I'm going to do object merge. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this right here. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. I'm going to grab this and just drag it over here. And that way, if we come and look at this, it's just going to be grabbing this right here, but it's a tidier way of doing it so we don't have wires going everywhere. And so here we are. Let's type in clump so that we can get our hair clump. And let's see, what is it asking for? It's asking for guides, and then it's asking for skin, which we can get from right there. And then it's asking for skin VDB, which is the last node that we have that has the skin VDBs right up there. And so now it's looking a lot better, but we want each clump to be we want there to be one clump for each tube. Right now we just have a whole bunch of clumps because if I move this around, you can see that it's just changing the size of the clump. So we can do that by using the clump guides. So let's connect this together. And it's giving us an error because we need to actually repeat this guide skin attribute lookup step again for the hair clump guides. So let's type in skin, and then let's grab this guide skin attribute. And so let's plug the guides into the guides, and then we need to grab the skin again. So let's just grab the skin from over here from the guided vect. And so there's a skin. And now if I connect this, it should work. Ah, yes, now it's working. Perfect. And let me go to the hair clump node. And for the method, instead of extrude and blend, I'm just going to choose linear. And let's see, what other options do we have? Oh yeah, this is really cool. There's like a curve right here that you can use to control how the profile looks along the length of the guide. And so let's see, what else can I change? Oh yeah, right. So let's go back to the hair gen. I'm just going to make a little bit more hair because there's not a lot right now. And there we go. We got a little bit more here. And let's just mess around with this just a little bit. And I just want it to be just slightly open at the top. And then let's go up and turn on curling, and then turn up the amplitude, and then turn down the frequency so it's not so much. Nah, it's still a little bit too much. There we go, that's a little bit better. And let's go back to let's go to fractal clumping and turn this up just a little bit. Oh, there you go, we can see we're getting some nice separation there, so it's not all the same. And then we can mess around with stray hairs, and so that just makes it so that some of the hairs stray around. They're not all so tightly clumped together. And you can pretty much do anything from here. Whatever you want to do, it's just up to you. Let me pull over my other screen really quick and then put it on the display flag. This is what I wound up doing from my original design, but you can put in whatever settings you want. So let me go back over here. The last node that I added was just a frizz node. And let's connect that. And actually, cool trick in Houdini 18 is it's kind of cumbersome to drag all these wires together. So if you just hit J and do that, it'll automatically connect all of them together. Then you can see that we just added a bit of frizz. And something cool is if you go to the masking and then curve mask, you can change the frizz along the curve. So you can see that. Let's actually change this ramp so it's more frizzy at the base, and then it's less frizzy at the top. And I'm going to turn off visualize mask so I don't have to see that anymore. And that's pretty much it. I'm going to template this just so that we can see it. And there we go. That's basically the workflow. It's a lot more complicated than what you can do with XGen. Like with XGen, it's pretty simple. You just select your tubes and then you select the base geometry, then it generates it for you. But here you have a lot more control, and I find that the results that I get look a lot better too, especially the hair that it generates on the inside of the tube. And the other reason why this is better too is because this doesn't just work for tubes. It pretty much works for any type of mesh. You could throw in any custom shape, like if you want square or like I said, any shape, and then you can advect your guides based off of whatever mesh you input. All right, well, thanks for watching this tutorial. I hope you found it helpful, and I'm going to be making more tutorials in the future, so stay tuned. Thank you.